Hello, children. This is Johannes from Avatar, your favorite band. Oh, yes, it is. And I say, may the rock be with you. Hello.
Johannes, how are you?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you. How are you?
I'm excellent, thank you. Thank you so much for joining the interview today.
My pleasure.
Lovely. And welcome to May the Rock Be With You. That's why we're here today to talk about your amazing, finally upcoming Australian tour.
Oh, yes.
Very
Long
exciting.
time in
Now,
the making.
oh, many, many years in the making. Now, because you're finally heading here, and when you're coming to a country for the first time, what's the process like putting a set list together for these shows?
Hmm. I don't know if there's a big difference in the process. Like, basically, what we got going now, it's going to be what we have done. We, okay, like this. We have done this year, I think we have done a lot of our absolute the best shows that we have done so far in our lives, and the set list that we built around it and theatrics that goes with it and everything is obviously a huge part of it. And as we want to show ourselves from our very very best at this time, it's going to be similar. And we going for the first time means that you would like to catch up on everything ever done,
Mm.
but uh, we already stay on stage for like 2 hours per night, and to do the Springsteen in the 4 hours, I get that someday maybe, but not now. So I mean, we were sticking to a plan that we pretty much have built throughout this year, only because it's a really really good plan.
Okay, looking forward to it. Now, for someone who may never have ever seen the band live before, how would you typically describe an Avatar live show?
Um, Excuse me, I need a sip, but
You know?
I wonder. I don't get to be the one who typically needs to describe it. I just do it. Uh, but I think the essence of what we do is that it is theatrical as opposed to theater. It's the adjective, not the noun, in the sense that I've been to the opera, I've seen ballet, and I've seen some plays, and I've enjoyed it. But that is something that is more locked in. There's a very specific goal in how it's supposed to be performed every night, right? And doing a heavy metal show, it's somewhere in between that and something much more free, in the sense that we got our songs, we know how we want to sound and do it well, right? um, but then there's also the thing that the art form of doing a rock or metal show, anything like that, there's a moving audience in front of you. It's not a seated audience just receiving, it's a two-way communication.
Mm.
And as such, it's about being attentive to where people are at in the room when you enter, and keep that in mind and where you want to bring them. And our shows are a hell of a ride. It's very dynamic, and I mean the heavy stuff is real heavy. It's intense and violent, but we take you through peaks and valleys with it, and we make sure to bring you along for the ride. So it's all about catching that vibe in the room. This doesn't really answer your question. This is a thought process behind it.
I
But it's
like it. It
a
makes me look forward to it.
it's
I'm looking
a
forward to Sydney.
I mean the shorts. I mean the tagline for it would be, it's a metal circus. It's not circus metal. Um, that sounds silly, but it's a metal circus.
I think it's brilliant. I can't wait. Now, what are you most looking forward to about coming down to Australia?
I think it's maybe a bit mundane in a way, but when going someplace for the first time, it takes so little for it to feel new and different and exciting. I mean, over time, I just we presume that enough tickets will be sold, and we're gonna do continue to be the best band we have ever been, and as such, which should mean that we get to come back. It's
Mhm.
But now is the time to prove that. Now it's up for people to show up, spread the word, do the whole thing now, so we get to do that. But in the future, I hope to see Barrier Reef and go, you know,
Yeah.
and do Ayers Rock or whatever. First time you go somewhere, it's enough to go into a gas station, like, that's a different bar than one at home, and things like that, and like, oh, the street lights are okay, you know.
Yep.
How the everyday normal things becomes exotic initially. So I'm just going there without the huge plan of, oh, we gotta do this, gotta do that, gotta do this, I'm tourist for that. I mean, if I'm not, I'm being told there's a lot of kangaroos, and if I don't see one, I'm pissed. But aside from that, it's a lot of it is just let it hit you the way it's gonna hit you, and that is something you only get to do that part once.
Mm.
And so I look forward to that. So it's not something specific for that reason. It's just making everything a tourist experience.
Sounds good to me.
Now the normal things will be very normal later on, but now everything will be extraordinary.
Yeah, looking forward to that for you. Now, your latest album, Dance Devil Dance, it came out earlier this year. Now, with 9 albums in tow, what for you has been the biggest evolution in the way the band operates?
Biggest evolution. I think there's a lot of evolution going on all the time by design. So there's a constant in the constant change. We for example, we are all huge fans of Devin Townsend. And I think he is one of the prime examples of someone who, you know, he has hit success in the metal scene over and over again with specific things he has done in his career, but he's been very willing to abandon certain outfits, like, you know, strapping young lad and whatnot, when it hasn't felt right or true to his own goals and where he's at in life anymore, and he has moved forward to do what he feels the most inclined to do at any time. So that he's constantly on the move, which means that there's always that chance of, and it keeps happening, that his greatest work is ahead of him, which for you know, artists that are no longer 22 is not always the case. But I think that's many times the case because they are, you know, if you strike gold early on, then you might think that's the formula, that's who I need to be now, and then you have to be 22 for the rest of your life. And I mean, Mötley Crüe suck. So so to dare to evolve all the time and to be honest to yourself artistically like that all the time means that there's a constant evolution. And also there's this, that every album kind of becomes a reaction or almost a rebellion acted out against where you were at just before. If we wind back to, well, let's say Avatar Country, the album that really grew out of an inside joke and was where the core feel of it was humor. And, you know, we took the music as seriously as ever and stuff, but it's still, you know, 6 love songs to my guitar player and a couple of skits in between, and just this crazy concept. That also meant that, of course, the next album therefore becomes dead serious because everything we had kept in at the time, that becomes Hunter Gatherer, and then we learn things from that. I mean, and so the next album, this is still a dark album, Dance Devil Dance, but it's dark metal that you can shake your hips to, and the hip shaking is extremely important. And I think we are getting better at that all the time and learning more about it. It's like most hip shaking rock show I can remember having been to is actually, I finally saw Deep Purple for the first time, I guess the year before the pandemic or something, you know, on a festival. And just how, if you are the kind of a dedicated musician who's been dedicated musician since you were a kid, now I guess you're pushing 70 or beyond, and you've just been loving to play, it sounds like, your whole life, you just sound better than anyone else, you know, and how locked in you are, and you make the spine tingle, and they could play nursery rhymes and it would have been magic. And I mean, I want to believe that we as a band is on that trajectory, going in that direction too over time.
Okay, looking forward to see that happen. Yeah, you got that. Now, what I loved about this, though, is I was looking back through your albums, and you actually helped produce this album with Jay Ruston. Now, when you sit behind the producer chair of it and that side of it, how does the music creative process differ for you when you're producing rather than creating?
Well, it is very much a co-producing role. So you sit there basically as a songwriter still and a performer in the band, but just yeah, you sit in on the other guys performing, and therefore you're one of that one of the ball planks
Mm.
in it. But and to so we guide each other through and provide ideas and stuff for each other's performances, and also help pull Jay, constant dialogue with Jay, that is obviously the producer in the room, because being the producer sounds hard and boring. But to co-produce means you get to, pick and choose in which aspects of what you're recording that you can dig in deeper to from that aspect, and then just drop that completely, because I'm not a co-lead singer. I'm simply a lead singer, and this is where I have to be all the time, the whole time. But it's just helping guide through the process of the song at large. It's I don't know, like as a co-producer, I get to check my phone a bit more often during a session than as a lead singer.
It's a good way to look at it. Now, you have songs like The Dirt I'm Buried In. It has that chorus hook that I just walk around sometimes and just start humming, because it's just one of those ones that just seeps in. What's it like in the studio when a song like that comes together?
It varies greatly. Like that song in particular, it's funny to me. When each time you do a new batch of songs for an album, some of them, there's always at least one that is completely or in parts quite old. That just some songs need to mature and things need to happen to it over time. And that chorus, you will discover if you play, I guess the tempos, everything about it is different, but the chords underneath that chorus and the chorus for Smells Like a Freak Show are the same.
Mm.
Because it started as a chorus for Smells Like a Freak Show, and it was obviously an amazing chorus, but it just didn't fit the song. So that is also the courage of daring to cut out something that in itself is that good, but doesn't make sense where it's at the time. But it kind of kept it put it to the side, and through the years added a part. The clean guitars in the beginning and stuff was also an early thing, and having a disco beat was an early thing, but with not as good of a bass line for most of its existence. And that existed for a long time, and we would revisit it, and it's one of those things where what was it, you learn the same lesson over and over again when writing, I think, to just let it go, follow the song, don't try to pull the song somewhere. The song would pull you, because it was like, oh, this is a bit light and disco and funny, so we probably need to sound like Stockholm death metal from 1991 in the middle part to balance it out. And it never worked, obviously. Then suddenly it's 9 minutes long, and what is this, why is this? So to kind of, okay, one step back, what do we have here? You can snap your fingers to that. Okay, let's snap your fingers through the whole thing, writing wise. And how that one in particular went to the studio, so most of it's written, some of it's written forever ago, but put together and finalized and actually done while working on this album. There was a middle part that was completely different, more of a jam. I had listened to a lot of Prince, and so like, I'll just slap some bass here and skanky guitar and stuff, and that's fun. But never quite, we liked it because it's fun to play, because we don't always play like that, but it didn't quite make sense. And then just going through the big old bag of riffs, Tim had this thing that becomes the bridge in the middle that leads into the solo. So just, actually, this makes sense, and you put that in. That happened in the studio, that rewrite, and then it was a bit bouncing back and forth on the drum beats, and then came the challenge, and which is the whole. This album is recorded. All bass and drums were recorded as one, together, and then they did also, what do you call it? Takes on guitars that were we didn't intend on keeping because we wanted to be able to dig in on guitar sound more individually, song by song. But still, there were always two guitars playing along, and many times I was singing along just to guide to make it more, to make it also part of the writing and arrangement process to record, not just do all the drums all at once for every song and then move on, but be able to really hear everything as a song as you do those rhythm section takes. And in that, so we record live like that, but depending on the drum sounds, sometimes that live feel can go away. That is something that I feel happened a little bit on Hunter Gatherer in the mix, because you utilize so much of the mics that is close to the drums. So it's an isolated sound, sounds great, but we really wanted this to be grittier and more really put in the room with us. So we're sitting there and like, okay, this is live, this is people grooving together, but it sounds very, a bit too tight, almost a bit like just sound wise, you're not there with us. So it was that thing of like, pack some distortion on the bass, although this is a smoother bass line, and then use that room mic on the drums a bit more to capture the noise, to capture the room. And so that happened with that one as well. And then for a while, I don't know, John had a day where he wanted to be Terry Bossio that day. So it was a couple of takes before, now you're gonna play a disco beat or I will kill you. And then he did, and it's great.
Excellent.
So, but it's many times, most of the songs are quote unquote done when you come into the studio. And then, but just because the way we record, we are allowed to change everything if we want to. Then we have one or two wild cards with us that aren't done at all. Valley of the Seas was like that on this album. We didn't have the chorus, but everybody learned the riffs because this is so good that if we can come up with a chorus, it's going to be one of the best songs ever. And and the studio environment, you're really wired to write at that point, so it's relatively easy to get. You need to allow yourself to have ideas there as well, also as a writer, not just recording music.
Yeah, awesome. I think that's amazing. Now, when you look back over your career, it can be very easy to say what can change over time, but what's the one thing that's always stayed the same about what you do?
Us being us, as friends and as a band, as a brotherhood. Now, granted, Tim is the new member, so he's only been here for a decade. Tim has been longer in Avatar than Ringo Starr was in the Beatles, but still, and we had known him for years before he joined the band. The Simon who left were still friends, but that brotherhood between us, and the fact that we've been able to survive from puberty into our roaring 20s into whatever life is right now, and the constant of that we've been able to make that trip together, tied to life inside and outside our music, has been a constant that we've been very consciously fighting for, to have it be like that. That's what we want to do. The job description as far as wanting to do music, the way we want to do it is very narrow, a very narrow path, as we want to write and perform our own material and take the disband as far as we possibly can in a way where we remain friends. And that's it. There's no other way I'm interested in doing this. And so, so that has been the constant.
Okay, that's amazing. Now, with a career that spans over 2 decades in Avatar for yourself, what's on your list of things to do that you haven't done that you'd still love to do?
Go to Australia.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that.
There's a lot of world. We've done a lot of touring in the part of the world that thinks it's the whole world, meaning the northwestern hemisphere, which is great. But there's a lot more world. There's a whole global south that we just, now we're going to Australia and to prove a point. And last year was South America, same way, and more of that, of course. Asia, for that matter, we're the only Swedish band who hasn't played Japan. Every Swedish band has played Japan except for us, and so on and so forth. And then I want to tour Africa as well. So that's it. But otherwise, I mean, there are a lot of this creatively. As long as we can stay on this trajectory, this path of finding a way to make each album feel like you're the beginner in one way or another. That is something like, can we pull this off? Which might be something very specific as a comedy album or concept album or first time we decided to record things live. Or now it's a bunch of little things in terms of this last one of Dance Devil Dance, but just to keep finding that, what's this? How do we do that? Can we pull this off? We have never done anything like this. Keep chasing the high of doing that.
Excellent. That's a good way to look at it. Great way to look at it. Now, the one question I always like asking is, I wish I wrote it. So is there one song in the world that you wish you'd written, and what would that be and why?
Which song has brought in the most money in the world?
White Christmas.
Yeah, maybe one of the Christmas songs. I was also thinking Yesterday, isn't that the one that's been played the most in
Good tune.
radio ever?
Not a Motley Crue song, obviously.
No. Or maybe I could have helped him. What else? No, like I mean, it's almost a different way of asking which is my favorite song. But then something that relates, favorite song that relates the most to what we are doing, maybe. It's hard. Just because I was talking about Simon and Garfunkel before. Actually, in a style, right? Like America by Simon and Garfunkel. I think lyrically, and they have many like this, where it's very poetic, but in a prose way, a very clear narrative. There's a story that progresses throughout that song, and just enough information where it becomes very clear images of that day and age and that bus trip they're on and stuff, and you can smell it in the air when you listen to it, but at the same time, the emotions of it and everything, the playfulness to the excitement, to the playfulness, to the melancholy, to the anxiety of it, and the journey that you've been on in that sense. If I would have written that one, it would prove that I am able to write on that level, I guess. So, yeah, America by Simon & Garfunkel. That's a good one.
Excellent. Good choice. Now, lastly, what I do with everyone is I get them to look ahead to the future with a prediction. So I want you to finish this sentence for me. By the end of 2023, Avatar will
celebrate Christmas. No, but then we will by that time we're just getting started.
Nice. Right. Just getting started. I like that. That's a good way to look at it. Johannes, thank you so much for your time, man. I cannot wait for this show in Sydney. It's going to be an absolute blast.
Neither can I. Thank you.
Thanks, man. I'll talk to you then. See ya.
See ya. Take care.
Bye.